Madam Chairman, and thanks for having this hearing. I think it's timely with the immigration debate that's raging on the Hill, with the Senate taking up immigration reform legislation, and we do have an illegal immigration problem in this country. I'll note for the record that roughly 40 to 50%, almost half of all the illegal aliens in this country came here legally. They came through an airport or a port through a visa system. They were students, they were tourists, they were here on a work visa, decided they loved America as much as I do and decided to stay. And we know who these people are. They've had an interview at a consulate. They filled out an application. We probably have a last known address. We probably know where they were going to school, where they were working, or the hotel they were staying at. And so that's low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned with regard to immigration enforcement, because these aren't chasing footprints in the desert. These are people that we know about. And it's a little different when you talk about an illegal alien that just walked across our southern border or across our northern border or got off a merchant ship and decided to enter this country illegally. These are folks that willfully came to this country, and we gave them permission. By issuing that visa, America is saying, come on into our country, experience what we have here in America, work for an employer, go to school, or enjoy our country as a tourist. And I was doing some research about student visas, and I understand that they've got to go through an application process and they have to have an interview at the consulate. In fact, everyone that comes for a visa has to have an interview unless you're of certain ages. You're 13 or younger, you generally don't require an interview. If you're 80 and older, an interview is generally not required. But if you're 14 to 79, you went to a consulate or you went to an embassy in your home country, and you sat down in front of a customs enforcement officer or a CBP officer or somebody from the Department of State, and y'all had an interview. And it says here on student visas, we gave a thumbprint. You're going to give a ink or non-ink digital fingerprint scan will be taken as part of your application process. I think that's vital as we talk about an exit system, that we do have that information. But as we look back at what happened in Boston with the bombing there, according to reports, one of the individuals arrested in connection with the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing was able to return to the United States despite the fact that he lacked proper documentation associated with his student visa. So I've got to ask myself, when he came into this country and he walked in front of that customs enforcement officer at that airport, which I have done at Dulles and Atlanta and other places, that little interview, when they ask you that question as Americans coming into our own country, I'm intimidated, I'm nervous. This guy was coming to our country without the proper documentation, and yet we stamped his documents and let him come into the country. That alarms me as a United States citizen. And according to the reports, the lapse occurred in part because the Customs and Border Protection officers at primary inspection currently do not have access to ICE's Student Exchange Visa Information System, SEVIS, database to verify whether a student has an active I-20 and is eligible to be admitted to the United States. So we're granting him a visa over here, but we're not telling the proper authorities that are doing that interview in that line at Dulles International Airport, at a Boston Airport, or in Atlanta, Georgia. They're not having access to the information they need to determine the eligibility of that guy's status coming into this country. Wow. And we've had numerous hearings in this committee in the last Congress, and already one in this Congress, where we've talked about this failure to communicate between systems across agency lines. We had the 9/11 Commission report talked about security information being stovepiped, but we're talking about folks that we allow to come in this country, visas that we issue, and we're not allowing the guys that are the frontline defense of our country, that are standing in that booth or sitting in that booth, interviewing those folks coming into this country. They don't have access to the information that they need to determine the status of that individual coming in. It's no wonder we don't have more people like the gentleman that came in from Boston that went to Russia and came back. It's no wonder we don't have more of that if y'all aren't allowing those computer systems to talk to one another, if the information isn't being shared with the vital frontline components in this nation. So I'm alarmed about that. America's alarmed about that, and they're looking to us as members of Congress to ask the hard questions about why. Why aren't those computer systems talking? Why doesn't his personnel that are standing in those booths have the information that they need to determine whether that person can or cannot come into this country? Those are the questions that we need to ask. Those are the questions America is asking when we look that we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars, established DHS and 225,000 employees. We've spent a lot of money in this country to try to make this country safe, and these seem like simple components that have been either overlooked or neglected. I think about the first suspect or person of interest, the Saudi national that was in the hospital. He was supposed to be going to college in Ohio. A text file was created on that individual because they couldn't determine that he was ever enrolled in college in Ohio. But yet he had sent his paperwork in to go to a college in Massachusetts. And so he was original suspect because there was a failure of communication there. Guys, we've got to get it right. We've got to address this, and we've got to address it fairly rapidly to get it right to secure this country. That's what this committee is charged with. That's what you guys are charged with. And Madam Chairman, I hope we have another round of questions because on my rant, I didn't get to my question, so I yield back.
We're going to try to have another